On December 16, 1967, a cinematic gem was released into French theaters. That film was Jacques Tati's PlayTime. When the film first came out in 1967, it came out to little fanfare, failing to make its money back and financially ruining Jacques Tati. But the film has now become regarded as one of the greatest films ever made, and in this video I'm going to go over exactly what makes this movie special while sprinkling in the story of its production, because this is a rare case of when the story of the production is just as interesting as the film itself. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video, grab some snacks, and let's play with PlayTime. Now before I talk about PlayTime, I want to talk about its director, Jacques Tati. Jacques Tati was a French actor and director known for making comedy films, with a history in mime and performance art, and applied a lot of his mime abilities to his performance in his films. Tati was also a huge perfectionist. Usually he wouldn't film a scene unless it was sunny out, or he wouldn't film a scene if the actors were not wearing the right colored socks. That's just how much of a huge perfectionist he was. But that's what added to his charm. He wanted his films to be the best they can possibly be. Jacques Tati only made 6 films throughout his entire career: Jour de Fête, Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, Mon Oncle, Traffic, Parade, and this film, PlayTime. Now when PlayTime came out in 1967, his last film, which was Mon Oncle, came out in 1958. And that film is what you can call a predecessor to PlayTime, because Mon Oncle is essentially about the main character, Monsieur Hulot, who's seen the old Paris crumble down before him and being replaced with modern technology, in which this film takes that concept and cranks it up to 11. To talk about the plot of PlayTime is a very interesting endeavor within and of itself, because there really isn't a plot. Instead, we follow around Jacques Tati's character, Monsieur Hulot, as he gets overwhelmed and bewildered by the modernity of Paris. But Hulot is not the only person we follow. We also follow a group of American tourists as they go to different locations around Paris, including an expo displaying modern technology, a hotel, and a restaurant. Notice how the tourists do not go to any of the monuments. Instead, they go to places that show off the modernity of Paris. And that's basically the story of PlayTime, just watching Hulot and the American tourists go from place to place and somehow get into hilarious hijinks. Most of the film is wordless, and acts a lot like a silent movie. And that's what makes the film so unique, is that it's a film that's run on its sound effects. Like all of his films, they all have a unique soundscape, and Tati has this really interesting ability of taking any sound and making it somehow funny. Like, Tati just sitting in a chair can all of a sudden be funny just from the sound alone. Jacques Tati's character of Hulot acts a lot like Charlie Chaplin, or any of the silent film stars from the old days. But instead, it's in a modern day setting. But that's what makes the film work. The film is basically about the comedy. In fact, during filming, Jacques Tati reported to have stated the style of comedy for this film is a democratic style of comedy. As in, it's a style of comedy where the whole frame has elements of comedic events, and how it's a satire on the over-industrialization of Paris. And yes, this film does take place in Paris, but a Paris that has become completely modernized. Known landmarks like the Eiffel Tower are usually seen in only reflections, or just objects in the background that don't really matter. Instead, we get these bland, lifeless, monochromatic buildings. They overtake the skyline, and there seems to be an endless amount of them. Construction of these buildings are looked upon as if people are looking at a parade, where one scene we see a huge crowd go look at a construction of a building. But all of this leads to very comedic setups, where Tati expertly uses all the hyper-modern tools that are in the film to its advantage, where he can make visual gags, like this one, and this one, and this one. Little gags like that are present throughout the entire film, but there are also comedic events that happen in the background or in the middle ground, gags that you probably did not see the first time you saw it. To make sure that the film was shown in the best possible quality, Tati filmed it on 70mm film. If you have already noticed from the clips I'm showing you, the whole film is shot with wide shots, and there are barely any medium or close-up shots. Tati wants us to see everything in the frame, like this shot at the beginning of the film for example. Not only is there a couple sitting waiting for an airplane, but there is also a janitor trying to clean the floor when the floor is already crystal clean, and there are 3 people who look like they are mannequins until they start to move. This could have been done in 3 different shots like a traditional comedy film would, but Tati wants us to know that this is a film where every single detail is important. And this displays Jacques Tati's democratic style of comedy where the whole frame has something comedic happening, not just in the foreground, but in the background and even in the middle ground. And the point that Tati is trying to make with all of this is that he finds the hilarity and also kind of the tragedy in losing the old Paris, and how we are becoming enslaved to technology. He's not necessarily saying that hypermodern technological buildings are a bad thing, but what he's saying is that we're becoming so over-reliant on them that we're just becoming enslaved to it. And this can sometimes be a good option and sometimes can be a terrible option. To give some background on PlayTime, the whole movie was essentially made as a response to something that the president of France at the time, Charles de Gaulle, said. He said that he would redevelop the country into a more modern city. Jacques Tati, who lived in Paris his whole life, decided to make a film about the tragedy of losing the old Paris and having it replaced with ultra-modern, high-tech skyscrapers. And what Tati did for the set design is very impressive. He created his own miniature city, also known as Tativille. It was an enormous set that was built outside of Paris, where Tati used full-scale building models that he could move at will and make sure that he can get the right effect for the film. It broke ground in 1964, but it wasn't finished until 1965 because there was a storm that came in and destroyed most of the set. And the set was not insured. So it cost the studio Spectre Films and Jacques Tati at least £1 million francs. And since Tati was the only producer on this film, he had to sell the rights to his previous films and he had to sell his house. He even went to his own mother to invest her money into the film as well. Even the Prime Minister got involved, as he visited the set one time and managed to extend Spectre Films' credit line. The production ended up concluding in October of 1966. The film then took 9 months to edit and premiered in France at the Un Pièce Cinema in Paris. The budget for this film was never fully reported on, but many people say that it was between 2 million to 17 million francs, making it the most expensive movie ever made in France at the time. Even though it's not confirmed, many people think that this movie only grossed $66,000. And a lot of this might be because the American release of this film was not released in 1967, instead it came out in 1973. This is because America refused to make a 70mm print for the film and wanted it to be put down to 35mm. And by this point, Jacques Tati's other film, Traffic, came out in 1971. I've already discussed a couple of reasons why the movie failed at the box office, but another reason is that the movie is just not mainstream enough for standard cinema goers. As I said, the film does not follow a standard 3-act narrative, and the film is also 2 hours long. It was trimmed down to 1 hour and 50 minutes on the studio's request, but the damage was already done. And not a lot of people want to go to see a film that's 2 hours long and doesn't have a 3-act narrative. But despite all of this, the movie is a timeless masterpiece. And it's timeless because when you look at the production design and the set and all the stuff that went into this film, it almost does feel like modern day life in a way. In America especially, buildings nowadays look almost as dry, monochromatic, and ugly like they do in the film. And also there's such an over-reliance on technology and an obsession with getting the new hip thing. Kind of like when you get an iPhone 14, but then when the iPhone 15 comes out, you want to get the new hip phone. Another reason why this film is timeless is because it's a comedy film that doesn't feel like other comedy films. Most comedy films nowadays are all about the words, and about trying to get a laugh out of the viewer for saying funny jokes. But in Tati's case, his gags are entirely visual. It's a kind of comedy that we barely see anymore. Maybe Edgar Wright is an exception to that, but Jacques Tati was like if Edgar Wright was on steroids with its visual jokes. The film has also been an influence on several filmmakers, like David Lynch, Mark Romanek, and of course Wes Anderson. Steven Spielberg's film The Terminal is a direct homage to the opening sequence of Playtime. That's just how much of an impact this movie has had on filmmaking. It's a film that lives in its own world, a film that redefines what it means to be a comedy film, and a film that redefines what it means to be a satire. Everything about this film is unique and interesting, and it will continue to have an impact on future filmmakers for years to come. Thank you all for watching this video, hope you enjoyed my analysis of Playtime, hope you all enjoyed it, and see you soon.